Welcome to European Journeys. This is the fifth stage of a series that takes us to Sweden, and where we look in fact at how Sweden was Christianized. The Christianization of Sweden happened a bit more than 1,000 years ago, and for this stage we are going to visit the province of Västergötland. This is a province where lies the biggest lake of Sweden, and not only of Sweden but the whole European Union. It is Lake Vänern. And that lake is not only famous because of its size, but also because of a battle that happened here in the 6th century, a time that was way much earlier than the Christianization of Sweden. And I'm talking about the Battle of the Ice of Lake Vänern. It is recorded in the Norse sagas and also in Beowulf, that epic poem we talked about in our very first stage of this series. Now, not so far from the shores of the lake, we find a small village called Husaby. It is not far from a town called Lidköping, and it's very small. There's not many inhabitants there. But nevertheless, we find a church, which that is obviously common in Sweden, but it is a quite tall church, and it's a church that was built in the 11th century. It's a Romanesque architecture. And finding a tall church in such a small village, obviously, is not common. And so why do we find such a tall church? Well, the answer is to be found 200 meters away from the church. There we find a memorial, and not so far from the memorial, towards the fields, behind trees, we find a well. Now, the memorial and the well, they both refer to one and the same event, that is the baptism of a Swedish king. And the memorial, in fact, is a memorial to that Swedish king, who is named Olof Skötkonung. As for the well, it is in fact named after the man who baptized Olof Skötkonung, and that is Saint Siegfried. So today we're going to talk a little bit about who is Olof Skötkonung and how in fact his conversion influenced deeply the country of Sweden. Now, Olof Skötkonung was born in the 980s, so towards the end of the 10th century, and his name probably refers to the fact that his father, who was king of Sweden, of course, Eric the Victorious, we talked about him in our last stage, his father would have taken him as a small child on his lap and would have asked the nobles of his country to come and pay homage to his son, who was just a little boy, who was sitting on his lap, and so Skötkonung means in fact lap king. That's one possibility for the name Skötkonung. The other possibility, which has been advanced, is that Sköt, S-K-O with double dot, T, maybe refers to Scottish origins, Scot origins. It's not proven, but it's not impossible, because in fact intercourses between Britain and Scandinavia were not uncommon at the time. So that's for the nickname Skötkonung. Now, Olof Skötkonung is famous for a battle that he waged against the king of Norway, who was called Olaf. So the king we're talking about, the king of Sweden, is Olaf, but this king of Norway is Olaf Tryggvason. And the battle is the Battle of Svolder. It was a naval battle near modern-day Germany, near the island of Rügen. And that battle led to the death of the king of Norway, Olaf Tryggvason. Olof Skötkonung was united with the king of Denmark, Sven Forkbeard, and as a result of the battle, the lands of Norway, which were ruled by Olaf Tryggvason, were shared between the king of Denmark and the king of Sweden. Now, 8 years after the battle, Olof Skötkonung converted to Christianity and took his baptism. And that happened here, so in Husaby. But what would have led Olof Skötkonung to adopt Christianity? Well, if we look at his parents, it's very improbable that they would have influenced him. We talked about his father in our last stage. He had adopted Christianity, probably took his baptism as well, but it's very improbable that he would have influenced his son. Firstly, he converted, if he did convert, he converted in Denmark, where he was not with his son. His son remained in Sweden with his mother. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that Erik relapsed into paganism very quickly. And the third reason is that Erik died when, in fact, his son, Olaf Konung, was just a boy. So it's very improbable that the father would have influenced the son in this particular instance. The mother, well, her name is rather unpromising. She's called Sigurd the Haughty. That's the nickname she received. And she received it when she was a widow, when her husband had died. A man courted her, and as an answer, she not only said no, but she in fact killed him. So the Haughty probably comes from that fact. Then after that, she herself wanted to marry Olaf Tryggvason, that very king that her son would later defeat in the naval battle of Svolder. And Olaf Tryggvason did not accept her hand for the precise reason that she was not a Christian and she refused to convert to Christianity. For him, that was too much. Olaf Tryggvason was a Christian and he could not accept a pagan wife. So the parents of Olaf Konung very probably did not influence the conversion of the King of Sweden. So who could have influenced? What would have been the influence behind this conversion? Well, this would be rather surprising to claim, but it is very probable that it is in fact the king that Olaf Konung defeated, Olaf Tryggvason, that influenced Olaf Konung to become a Christian. Now that's surprising indeed. Why would Olaf Konung adopt the religion of the defeated king? Why would the defeated king be in fact the very influence for the conversion of Olaf Konung? Well, we need to talk a little bit about that king of Norway. Olaf Tryggvason became king in 995 and was a king for only 5 years. He died in the year 1000 at the Battle of Svolder. But before he became king, he went to Britain and he led violent crusades there. But he also converted probably in Britain. And as a result of his conversion, he was now convinced that he should Christianize his country, Norway. So he decided to return to Norway, but he returned with monks and clergymen from Britain, whom he would appoint as bishops with the specific task to go in all the regions of his kingdom and Christianize them. So that's what happened. His rule lasted only 5 years, but his influence is huge in Norway. Now, the region we are visiting, Västergötland, was part of Norway at the time. And of course, the Battle of Svolder led to the split of Norway between the Kingdom of Denmark and the Kingdom of Sweden. But here's what is remarkable. The King of Denmark and the King of Sweden, who had defeated Olaf Tryggvason, the King of Norway, agreed not only to share the lands between each other, obviously, but they made a compact with God together and agreed to continue the Christianization of the lands that they had now taken from the deceased King of Norway. That is quite remarkable. And they indeed continued to Christianize their lands. Now, talking about Olaf Konung, he obviously became king here in Västergötland as well, so his kingdom grew. And the bishops that were appointed by Olaf Tryggvason to evangelize, to Christianize the lands that were now under the rule of Sweden, became bishops under the King of Sweden, Olaf Konung, as well. And one of them was Siegfried, the man who baptized Olaf Konung. So it's very probable that it is that contact between these bishops that had been brought back by Olaf Tryggvason, the King of Norway, that influenced the conversion of the King of Sweden, Olaf Konung. Olaf Konung, as I said, so took his baptism here in Husaby, and that was done by Siegfried, the bishop of the area. And so Olaf Konung became a Christian and did not relapse into paganism, most probably also because he married a lady that was a devout Christian, an Irish lady called Astrid. So this is why Olof Skjøtkonung can be considered to be the first Christian king of Sweden, and his influence in Sweden was huge. Now, to finish with Skjøtkonung, his life was not so peaceful. He would also face other threats in the future. And this, in fact, is a picture of how unstable the times in Scandinavia were. And it is quite remarkable, nothing short of a miracle indeed, that Christianity continued to grow in such unstable times. Christian kings defeated by other kings, nevertheless, did not stop the spread of Christianity in Sweden and in Scandinavia as a whole. This indeed is nothing short of a miracle. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next week for another stage of European Journeys.